Hello, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and I am coming to you on behalf of Newsweek. This is the Better Show, and I am with this week's guest, Scott Miller. Scott is the author of the great book, Management Mess to Leadership Success, and he's going to be talking to us today about how we can implement some of those principles in our own lives. Scott, thank you very much. It's so great to have you here.
Dorie, such an honor. Thank you. I'm a huge fan. You have been a guest on Franklin Covey's podcast. It's how I discovered you and your books. I'm a loyal follower of all of your posts. What an honor to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. So great to talk with you. And also welcome to everybody who's joining us live. Please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know where you're coming from. We'd love to greet you. So please say hi and let us know where you're coming from. So Scott, I have a question for you. I loved this. In the description of Management Mess to Leadership Success, I'm reading through, one of the very first things it says is, Scott Jeffrey Miller knows what it's like to fail. And I'm like, well, that's a promising opening right there. So can you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure, Dorie. So written a few books now. I serve as the Executive Vice President of Thought Leadership for the Franklin Covey Company. Been here 25 years. Before that, I worked for the Disney Company. I'm from Orlando originally. Today, I'm live here in Salt Lake City, where we're headquartered. But I worked for the Walt Disney Company for 4 years, and they invited me to leave, which is kind of how Disney does that. They don't fire you. They just very graciously invite you to move on. So I've had a lot of ups and downs in my career. Was the chief marketing officer for Franklin Covey, worked my way from the front line to the C-suite, where I was an officer of this organization. And my whole career has been sort of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And I found that as I interviewed, like you, all these famous leadership authors and best-selling authors and CEOs, a lot of them don't share their messes. Most of the stories are really the highlights of their careers. And I just think fundamentally, you learn more from your mistakes than you do your wins. You learn more from your messes than you do your successes. So I'm kind of on a journey now in the second half of my life and career to let everyone that wants to learn from all the mistakes I made and use them as, pivot points in their own career to just let it out, share it.
That is really powerful, Scott. Thank you. I love that. And we'd like to say hi to some of the folks who are joining us live. We have Soledad from Argentina. We have Poonam from India. Yay. This is great. Scott, Ali wants to know, can you get the book? Can you get Management Mess to Leadership Success en français? Has it been translated yet?
It's in 6 or 7 languages. I don't know if it's in French yet. It will be. It will be. It's in, I know it's in Mandarin. It's in multiple markets. It's in Spanish. I don't know yet, but you also can, it's on audio, of course. And the book has done well enough that the publisher, Dorie, signed me to an 8-series volume. So the second book is called Marketing Mess to Brand Success. It comes out on May 11th, and then it'll be followed by Sales Mess, Job Mess, Communication Mess, Parenting Mess. There'll be a whole series. My hope is translated into French as soon as possible, but thank you for the question.
Amazing. You are a book phenom, Scott.
I'm following your path. I'm just replicating what you do, right? Dorie Clark's famous for what is your twist on someone else's idea. I'm just following your formula. That's all.
Well, thank you so much. And hi, Jeannie in the Cascade Mountains. We have Latifa from Morocco, but living in the United Arab Emirates. Anita from Poland. Ali from Gabon. This is wonderful. Isda from Mexico. We're so happy to have you guys here. Todd from New York. This is fantastic. So, Scott, a question. It sounds like one of your very first messes you actually mention in your book is that you actually got demoted early on in your career. What was behind that? And what, obviously you've learned a lot of things from it, but what happened?
By the way, my colleague just told me that Management Mess will be in French in the spring of 2021, so about 4 months from now. So,
exactly. Put it on your wish list.
Exactly. In fact, I was supposed to be in Dubai today giving speeches today. And of course, I'm not there. So what better to be on than Dorie Clark's Newsweek program? So lots of advances and reverses in my career. My first demotion was this. I joined the Franklin Covey Company back in 1996. I mean, if you're a single Catholic boy from Utah and Disney fires you, where do you go? Provo, Utah, right? Where the only Catholics were me and the priest, right? So I move across the country. out to Provo, Utah. I joined the Franklin Covey company where I've been for almost 25 years. They hired me as a salesperson selling our leadership solutions out to universities and school districts. To answer your question, I start to do a pretty good job in sales. And so the vice president promotes me, not just to be a salesperson, but to kind of manage this team of client service coordinators, because they thought I had some quality experience from Disney, and I did. The problem is, Dorie, I did not understand what it meant to be a leader of people. Like most leaders, I was promoted from being a great individual producer. And as you know, the competencies that make you a great salesperson do not make you a great sales leader. The skills that make you a great digital designer do not make you a great leader of digital designers. So I'm promoted to be a leader of this team of very competent people to bring up their quality, and I start my reign of terror, as I call it now, where I just started micromanaging them, trying to turn them into mini me's, mini versions of me. I start to just suffocate them. And in fact, I asked one young lady who was 19 getting married. That's kind of normal out here. It's Utah. She was going on her honeymoon. And I wanted to make sure she was going to check her email and voicemail during her honeymoon. She says, like, no, I'm not doing that. And I was serious. And so I was just a nightmare, the nightmare boss who was the know-it-all, the genius in the room. So I get a call one day. I'm having breakfast at a restaurant. Mobile phones had just come out. This is, 18 years ago, 20 years ago.
You must have been very trendy.
Or something. And my boss calls me. I'm convinced he's going to promote me again. But he doesn't. He actually unpromotes me. He demotes me. He relieves me from that reign of about 12 weeks of terror. And I've learned so much since then around owning your mess, recognizing not everyone should be a leader. I mean, I fundamentally am a bit of an iconoclast in this industry because I do not think everyone should be a leader of people. Just like not everyone should be a commercial airline pilot or an anesthesiologist. Not everyone should be a leader of people. And if you are, you need to be really aware of what your messes are and what it takes to be a leader of people. I've learned a lot in the quarter decade.
That's super interesting, Scott. Thank you very much. And just a quick shout out to some of the new folks who have joined us. If you're just tuning in, please feel free to type into the chat box. Let us know where you're coming from. We have Japar from Zurich. We have Annette from California, Christina from Prague, Debbie in Portland. We're so happy to have you guys.
I need a friend in Zurich. Japar, send me a connection on LinkedIn. I need a friend in Zurich. I got no one in Zurich.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm glad we're filling in holes in your network. Japar is fantastic. He's a very smart, well-connected guy. So you two will be in good hands.
Thank you, Japar.
I love it. All right, amazing. And also we are of course going to be taking your questions. So please feel free to start typing questions that you have for Scott into the chat box. We will be getting to them. And if you want to learn more about Scott and his great work, incidentally, you can check out his book at managementmess.com. And if you want to make sure that you never miss an installment every single Thursday of the Better Show for Newsweek, make sure that you follow me on LinkedIn. You just go to dorieclark.com/LI. That's the easy way to do it. Or you can open a new window and you will be notified about upcoming LinkedIn Live interviews that I'm doing for Newsweek. So, Scott, a question that I have for you then. So I'm curious, this is like this dark night of the soul, right? You get the call, you've been demoted after the excitement of having been promoted. Was it right away that you realized, oh no, I've been doing things wrong? Or did it take longer to sink in? Like, how did you actually come to realize that the management style you had been doing instinctively was not really the way that it should be done?
Probably a decade it took. I mean, it's a really piercingly insightful question. Let me set some context. I am an executive officer in the world's most reputable, in my opinion, leadership development firm, Franklin Covey. Our co-founder, Dr. Stephen R. Covey, of course, wrote the seminal book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He tutored me for 15 years. Dorie, I started in this firm when I was 26. And I dare say it probably wasn't until my mid-30s, late 30s, that I really understood the role of a leader. I'm a slow learn. And I was single. I was not married until I was 40. So I didn't really have a governor in my life to say, you can't wear that, you can't say that, you can't do that. I was kind of like a freelancer. And so like a lot of people, I was honest and ethical and hardworking and well-intended, but my technique was horrific. It was probably my mid-30s. And so I started to realize, leadership is about getting work done with and through other people. Leadership is about building relationships. Leadership's about building capability and capacity in others. Leadership's about turning the metaphorical light off of you and onto others. It took me probably the better part of a decade to understand my job is to build other people up, not for me to win every award, not for me to have all the credit. It took some time. And so I've learned a lot. I think I'm a much better leader now. Like, you've written multiple books on the topic. I wrote a book recently called Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. It debuted at #3 in the Wall Street Journal list. It's a great practical book on, how to lead people. And so I've learned a lot, but like you offered, it took me some time, too much time.
I think for most things in our life, we probably feel like, wow, that took me too much time to learn it. So I think the key is, do we
Especially
learn
Algebra 1 in high school. I can guarantee that took me too much time.
Especially that. So we have a great question, Scott, that actually came in from Kathy. And I'd love to hear your perspective on this. How do you restore confidence from your team after a major mess? If you're a leader, if you've sort of screwed up somehow, is there a way that you can pull back from this and make things right? What are your thoughts about that?
Love this question, Kathy. I mean, this is the crux, right? This is why I wrote the book, because I believe that as a leader, formal or informal, as a spouse, as a partner, as a friend, as a neighbor, as a son-in-law, you got to own your mess, because everyone's got a mess. And by the way, everybody knows my mess. Dorie knows my messes. Drew knows, and the receptionists, our clients, my colleagues, everybody knows my messes. So why not just own up to them? Own your mess. Because as a leader, when you own your mess, you make it safe for others to own theirs. I mean, Dorie, I think that vulnerability, perhaps in part thanks to Brene Brown and her genius contribution to our dialogue, has made vulnerability a leadership competency. Kathy, to your question, I think it was Kathy, the way you restore trust is you own your mess. You sit people down and you say, I owe you an apology, with no attachments, no excuses, no baggage, nothing. I apologize for being a jerk in last week's meeting. I said things that were rude. I was wrong. I apologize. I won't do it again. No explanation why, just own it. I think people want to relate to their leaders, right? They want leaders that are real and raw and vulnerable. By the way, you can show competence and you can be confident and still be humble. Humility and confidence are like brothers and sisters. In fact, only confident people, I think, can be humble people. Arrogant people are incapable of showing humility. So I think it's just a matter of calling it out, calling yourself out uncharacteristically. Bring your team together and just own your mess. And then you become a model of what you want to see in them. Don't offer any excuses. Don't refute it or deny it. Just own it fully. People will have generally a refound respect for you. Now, if you try to obfuscate, explain it away, or blame it on somebody earlier in the day, then you're going to be seen as a fraud. But if you own it completely and apologize with no attachments, the vast majority of people will resonate with that.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you, Scott. So we have a question from Annette who came in here, and I think this is a great one. She says, I agree with Scott's point and wish to learn faster. So how can you learn faster these days in growing your leadership skills? It's so important, but what does that actually look like? How do you learn to be a better leader? What's your take on that, Scott?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you are, what your journey is, right? I mean, there's never been a more broad depth of wealth of leadership resources, right? Books and podcasts and webcast and articles and such. I mean, so there's no shortage of information out there. I think it's like, how do you learn best? For some people, it might be identifying a board of directors of people that are, really wise sages in your life, where you can make it safe for them to give you feedback on your blind spots. That's one way. Another way is to pick one or two people in your life, like a Dorie Clark, right? Where Dorie could give you coaching on insights that are tripping you up or such. I think there's a great leadership philosophy that I have followed, and that is I always friend up. Now, I have a lot of friends that are friending up to me, and some people think this is maniacal, but I like to friend up with people who are wiser and smarter and better educated and older than me, and that really have gone through the trenches where I can learn from them. And by the way, they can learn from me, right? I'm keynoting their company's conference now, or I'm hosting them on my podcast. So it's very reciprocal. But I think the biggest way to learn is to learn from others. And like I said, I usually learn from the messes, the mistakes of others, not from their successes. I learned a lot from Bob Iger's book. It's back here somewhere, right? Bob Iger is, an iconic CEO. But quite frankly, I learned more from Dorie Clark. When Dorie shares on her LinkedIn or Facebook, like she did yesterday, the incalculable impact of missing commitments and letting people down. Now, she didn't share why she was saying that, but I'm guessing something in Dorie's life is weighing on her, and she owes some deadlines or some projects, and she's behind the gun on them. I always cleave to those who are vulnerable. So to your question, I think you got to figure out, what is the way you learn the best? What are the lessons you're trying to learn? And perhaps, sit down with someone who you trust and just have them give you feedback on your leadership style. Here's another short way, Dorie. I think it's important to ask people in your life, what's it like to be married to me? What's it like to date me? What's it like to lead me? What's it like to report to me? Go to those people in your life and just ask them, what's it like to work on a project with me? You'll learn a lot. You'll build your self-awareness tremendously.
That's a great tip, Scott. Thank you very much. We are here with Scott Miller. I'm Dorie Clark for Newsweek. If you are enjoying this conversation, please hit the like button. Please hit the share button so that more people can see it and your friends and colleagues can see how smart you are for tuning in. And if you would like to make sure that you never miss a segment, we go every Thursday, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. You can actually subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. Just go to dorieclark.com/LinkedIn. And you can get it there. And Scott, I wanted to make sure to ask you a great question that came in. It is a question from Todd. This is touche for both of us here. Todd, great question. He says, there are millions of management and leadership books and training programs. So why are there still so many horrible bosses?
Yeah, I'm very clear on that. I mean, Todd, it's a great insight, because common knowledge isn't common practice. Because to know but not to do is, in fact, not to know. Those are both quotes from our founder, Stephen R. Covey. I mean, I think it starts with your mindset, right? I mean, you can make short-term behavior changes, but you won't get long-term results. You have to work on your belief systems, your mindset, your paradigms, the lens through which you see yourself, you see your company, you see your world. Behavior change is hard. Ask my wife. She tries to change mine all the time, and mine hers. Common knowledge isn't common practice. I also think people try to boil the ocean. I think if you are building your self-awareness, pick one or two areas that are messes in your life and work on those. I don't think we can work on 15 things. I mean, my wife would tell you she's got 10 things she'd love to change about me. My boss probably the same thing. Incrementally, pick some small things, right? The words you're going to use today with others. How you're going to lift others up and not tear them down. How you're going to stop interrupting people. How you're going to mix the ratio of how much you speak with how much you listen. How you're going to move from being effective to being efficient, or from being efficient back to effective. Those are different things. You are efficient with things. You are effective with people. I would say the reason there's so many bad bosses out there is because not everyone should be a leader. A lot of people are promoted for the wrong reasons. I could talk for that on a whole different webcast. But I think too many people pick leadership roles for the wrong reasons. They want the title, they want the power, they want the compensation. They don't choose to become a leader for the right reasons, which is to share their messes, which is to lift people up, which is to achieve better results with and through other people by coaching them, by giving them feedback on their blind spots, by having high courage conversations that balance both courage and diplomacy. There's all these reasons. I think my advice would be pick one or two areas in your life as a leader that you could master. I mean, this whole studio is full of hundreds of leadership books, to your point, right? We're drowning in them. Pick one or two coaches, people that can impact the biggest return for your time, and don't try to boil your whole personality, boil the whole ocean, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott. And great comment, Todd. Great question. So we have some new folks joining us. Please feel free, if you're tuning in newly, type into the chat box where you're coming from. Anna is here from New Hampshire, Salem from Montreal, and we have Maria from Moscow. So we welcome our international friends joining us.
Dorie,
And
can I follow up on Todd's question a bit? Do you mind?
oh yes,
Sorry. So Todd, the book I wrote, Management Mass Leadership Success, the tagline is 30 challenges to become the leader you would follow. I wrote the book very deliberately in short chapters. Each chapter is like, 3 or 4 pages long, 30 challenges, kind of one per day for a month. That seemed digestible to me. And I use this card deck whenever I speak live in audiences. I have this card deck. And if anybody wants to connect to me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to ship you a card deck. These cards can be used one a day, every day of the week. You can have them on your dashboard, God forbid your dashboard, have them on your medicine cabinet, your laptop, right? But take one thing a day and kind of practice it all day long. I'm happy to ship anybody complimentary this card deck if you want to link to me on LinkedIn. You got to give me your mailing address. I'm happy to ship them international. But Todd, it's a great way to kind of, digest things one day at a time.
great tip and great offer, Scott. Thank you for that. So we had an important question come in, Scott. I think a lot of people worry about this, and I'd love to get your perspective on it. So one LinkedIn user wanted to know, were there any times that vulnerability fired back at you, that it backfired? If you're too vulnerable, might you be seen as an incompetent leader? How do you get over that concern?
You might. Of course it can backfire on you. Some people will weaponize your messes against you. That means they're bad people. They're all over the place, but they're always eclipsed by good people. Here, I think, is the governing principle. And I learned this from my friend Liz Wiseman, of course, who Dorie knows very well because they're both part of the Thinkers 50s group, which is an amazing honor. In fact, I'm even here today, Dorie, is an amazing honor to be in your presence. Liz Wiseman wrote a book called Multipliers. I highly recommend you buy her book. I think it's the best leadership book written in the last decade, Multipliers. And the premise of Liz's book is that as a multiplier of people, your job is not to be the smartest person in the room. Your job is not to be the genius, but rather the genius maker of others. And to the person who asked the question, I think it was Laura, I'm not sure the name. As a leader, I came to believe that my job was not to be the smartest person in the room. My job was to be a talent magnet. That as a leader, my number one top responsibility was to recruit and retain quality people. That my job was to hire people who were palpably, noticeably more talented than me. My job was not to be the genius. As the chief marketing officer for 5 or 6 years of that 7-year tenure, I thought my job, Dorie, was to be the most creative, right? The font of all information, the smartest, the most well-read. And I think subconsciously, I actually didn't hire people that were world-class in talent. I hired very talented people. No offense to those I hired, but I was eclipsed, I was fearful by hiring people who might overshadow me. So the answer to your question is you will always have some people who will weaponize your vulnerabilities against you. But I think generally speaking, if you hang a lantern on your troubles, if you shine a light on them, no one else can. I'm a stutterer. I am a diagnosed stutterer, either about 26 words I cannot say in public. I've had decades of speech pathology and speech therapy and braces twice and headgear and wear a retainer. In the cold, outside, in the winter, it goes like 126 words. Strategic becomes, I'm a stutterer. I talk about it openly. Quite frankly, I'm a better tactical executor than I am a strategic planner. I admit it. There's a huge world for tactical executors, right? The world's full of big visionary thinkers who can't get stuff done. Oh, I can get stuff done. So I don't let people weaponize my vulnerabilities against them because I'm proud of who I am. And by the way, when I admit that I'm a stutterer, I give license and power to those people who have speaking issues or fear of public speaking or stutters, right? So you're always going to have that. You know what? To quote my dear friend who I've never met, Taylor Swift, haters going to hate. Move on. Move on.
Amen to that, Scott. That's great. So,
Dorie, do you know Taylor Swift? I'd love to be your friend.
Taylor Swift actually lives not that far from me. I mean, she's probably on an island right now, but during normal
With Kim
circumstances.
Kardashian, I hear Kim Kardashian's on an island somewhere too. She's in some trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're watching Taylor, come hang out with me. I'm in FiDi. We can
Clark
chillax.
show.
Yes. So this is fantastic, and you raise a really important point about the nature of disclosure, right? I used to work in politics, Scott, and one of the sort of guiding principles was always that if you have some kind of a vulnerability, however that's construed, you need to control the terms of disclosure. If your opponent does, it is always going to look worse. It is always going to be used against you. Whereas, for instance, of course, Joe Biden, who is running for president in a handful of days, is also a stutterer and has talked about that openly. So he's also using that as a source of strength and a way of inspiring other people. So that's
There's
great.
a fine line, right, Dorie? I mean, it doesn't mean as a leader that you confess all your sins, right? And that you make this all about you and your problems. No, of course not, right? I mean, I think there's judicial deliberation that you choose what you share, what you don't. Not everyone needs to know everything about you or every time you're in trouble with human resources. No, I think there are teaching moments. But I also think there is this wisdom, like you say, of what I call is hanging a lantern on your own troubles. Right? I'm very comfortable talking about my strengths and my weaknesses because that's what's made me, I think, an influential leader, is not trying to be the genius in the room anymore, not trying to be a know-it-all, recognizing my strengths and complimenting the people that noticeably know my strengths, but they also know my weaknesses and they know their role in complementing those. It's not done overnight. That takes some time and deliberation and surrounding yourself with trustworthy people. Dorie, you've gone. I can't hear you. Unfortunately, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. We have time for probably about one more question. And so just as a reminder to those of you tuning in, if you are enjoying this conversation, please hit like, please hit share to make sure that your friends and colleagues can enjoy the conversation with Scott Miller as well. And of course, you can check out and learn more about his great new book, From Management Mess to Leadership Success, at managementmess.com. Scott, the last question that I have for you is I'm actually curious. Obviously, there are eternal and timeless leadership principles, but something that's on everybody's mind these days is more and more we're having to lead virtually, inspired by COVID, but now perhaps becoming a more permanent state of affairs for many companies. And so I'm really curious, how do we need to be thinking about remote leadership, and what might be different in terms of how to motivate people under those circumstances?
Yeah, very timely. My big insight would be, right now it's all about building connection. You often hear this human resource phrase that leaders create engagement. Leaders do not create engagement. That's not true. Leaders create the conditions whereby others choose their own level of engagement, high or low. So as a leader, I would be asking yourself, are you checking on or are you checking in? And that may seem subtle, but I think it's profound. If your mindset is that I'm checking in with someone, people feel that, they know that. If you're checking on them, people know that and feel that. As a leader, your job is to build a culture where people choose to be engaged high. They can share with you as your leader their fears, their passions, their concerns, that their children are running around in their underwear behind the Zoom camera and they're panicked about it because their apartment is small and there's nowhere to go. As a leader, you set that culture. Perhaps you share that you're burnt out. Perhaps you share that you need to set some boundaries, right? The leader sets the tone in the culture. Let me tell you, people are not an organization's most valuable asset. That is also not true. It is the relationships between your people that are your company's most valuable asset. And I'm telling you, when the vaccine comes, whether it's next month or next year, and people are no longer hostage inside your organization, it is the people who will choose to stay or choose to leave based on how their leader has either checked in or checked on, whether they've built a connection, whether they've been vulnerable, sharing their own, concerns about their own contribution or their burnout or their, career. Because everybody's going to be poached. Right now, everybody's being held hostage. But when the economy turns back around and unemployment drops and people start getting recruited again through LinkedIn, And by the way, it's happening right now. People will not quit leaders who love them. If people feel loved appropriately by their leader during the pandemic, where you open up a comfortable dialogue where it's safe to be yourself on both sides and share your concerns and your passions, you won't be replacing their position come spring or summer.
So important. Thank you very much for that, Scott. That's great. And we have been with Scott Miller. Scott Miller is the author of Management Mess to Leadership Success. And this is Dorie Clark for Newsweek. If you want to make sure that you never miss a better live stream with Newsweek every Thursday at noon Eastern, go to DorieClark.com. You can sign up for my regular updates and be tuned in there. Scott Miller, we're so happy to have you here. Thank you for spending the time with us.
Dorie, such an honor. You are so abundant. I model my own contribution, honestly, after yours. You're constantly lifting other people up and spotlighting them. It's why I follow you. Thank you for the platform, and I will be sure to pass it on to others as well.
Thank you so much, my man. And thank you all for tuning in and joining our live stream. We will see you next week. And our guest will be Brian Kramer talking about bringing the human back to business.